Randall, thanks for taking some time. Wanted to see if you could just give NextBillion readers and watchers a little bit of a sense of where you see the SGB space going. What's your view from the top here?
Sure. Well, first, thanks for the chance to talk to you, Scott. It's always great to work with NextBillion. What we talked about at the conference is that we feel like the sector that focuses on small and growing businesses and emerging markets is in a phase where you're seeing some still growth in the number and the size of funds that are interested in this space. But more interesting to us, an actual acceleration in the number of investments that are being made by those funds which do focus on it. So if we look back at our numbers from 2012 to 2011, the number of new funds was about the same, kind of 35 funds that we were able to identify that focus on this space. We did note, however, interestingly, that the target size of the fund has increased to over $100 million for the first time. And again, I should be clear that we're talking about fundraising target sizes. That's the database that we have access to. But then we were able to do some surveys of ANDE members and get real data on the number of investments that were taking place. And so we looked back over the existence of ANDE members, so basically about 10 years, and we found out that we had over 1,000 investments made this year, which is more than a quarter of the total investments that our members have made over their lifetime. And it represented more than 40% of the total dollar amount invested in the space.
In just 1 year.
In just 1 year.
Yeah.
So not surprisingly, it's a small and growing sector focused on small and growing businesses, and so you see that kind of acceleration, and we're excited to see that, and the people are actually spending, they're investing the money that they've been able to raise. That said, of course, there's still lots of challenges in fundraising and finding good investments in this space.
Yeah, and the large institutional investors, the JP Morgans, the Morgan Stanleys, are starting to enter the space. Maybe tepidly at first, but now are you seeing more buy-in for the SGB model?
You know, before it was kind of like a really slow step. You know, now maybe we're walking a little bit. So I think that what you've seen is that all the major institutional investors at this point have some sort of social finance arm, and they call it different things, that is focused on or at least exploring the idea of impact investing. And more what you've seen in the last few months is that they're actually making investments now. And so it's still not at the pace that we would like to see, right, or the overall impact investing sector would like to see, but there's no doubt that there's movement there, and it looks like that's another place where you're going to start seeing an acceleration in the number of investments that we see.
One of ANDE's other core functions is to provide capacity development grants and funding, as well as on the research side. I was curious about what you're seeing in terms of innovative new models that ANDE members are starting to research this year in terms of financing.
Yeah, so just a step back, I mean, we had a great year this year in that a lot of foundations and other financial sources wanted to leverage the ANDE platform to support the sector. So here at the conference, we announced $2.2 million of grants across a variety of issues on research, something called the Argidius ANDE Finance Challenge, which is really focused on this challenge of trying to identify and expand new financial structures to serve the most missing part of the missing middle. Mm-hmm. So those that need between $20,000 and $250,000 in investment. And then our sort of standard capacity development fund, which is a more broad-based fund, which this year had a particular focus on youth entrepreneurship. So across those three different programs, there's $2.2 million and 18 different winners. Mm-hmm. Specifically on the sort of financial models, that's what the AAFC, the Argidius ANDE Finance Challenge, focused on. Really interesting work that's being done out at Santa Clara by John Kohler and his team on something called a demand dividend model, which is a new form of hybrid equity. Which is bringing together a number of elements that they're going to be testing out both in West Africa and in Central America. There's a group called Scope Insight that's based in Europe that has developed an interesting, basically, credit scoring model for agricultural producers, which has been a particularly difficult area to work in. They think they've cracked the nut and have been doing this on a pilot basis in Africa, and now we're going to be expanding to Central America with the hopes that by providing better information about agriculturalists and agricultural cooperatives, they'll be able to drive more bank loans and bank capital into them. So we're really excited about the whole scope of awards from the AAFC and across the various competitions. It's too soon to say what kind of impact we're going to have yet, but we're really excited about what we've seen and the creativity that's going on in the space right now.
I mean, we're ANDE abuts the Clinton Global Initiative, and you're at that conference as well. I mean, just to sort of sum up here, what sort of excitement are you seeing around investing in, some people call them SMEs, you call them SGBs, but businesses that constitute this missing middle and are really starting to impact the way people's incomes are being changed?
So, I mean, clearly no one can contest that interest in this space is on the rise. At CGI, there are a variety of sessions on impact investing, and also specifically on small and growing businesses. I know that CGI's institution is going to be focusing on this area. World Economic Forum as well is really interested in impact investing, and they are going to be focusing some of their institutional resources on trying to drive impact investing. And of course, ANDE, and our focus specifically on small and growing businesses within that, we continue to grow. We continue to get invited to participate in multilateral efforts to try to support this sector. So interest doesn't concern me. What really matters, though, are we going to see the investments? Are we going to see the grant dollars coming in to support capacity development? And are we as a sector really going to be able to move the needle on getting the resources to those firms that have the potential to impact poverty in developing countries? I can't say we're there yet. Mm-hmm. I can say we're moving it,
Yeah.
I mean, maybe that we're kind of beginning to move the needle, but it hasn't gone nearly as far as we'd hope. But I leave this week incredibly optimistic by the energy I saw at CGI, the incredible energy we saw here at ANDE, and the depth of conversations that we had, and the partnerships that are being formed at every table. So I'm really optimistic, but we're not quite there yet.